What if one lie meant to protect a man ended up tying a stranger's fate to his forever? The road from Laramie stretched long and lonely across the Wyoming dust as Raina Morrow rode in the back of a wagon, clutching her worn sewing bag against her chest. At 23, she was thin from long work days at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Needle pricks marked her fingers, and half her weekly wages had gone to pay for this ride. She expected a simple job at the Bradshaw Ranch, maybe measuring shirts, maybe sewing a dress. Nothing unusual, but when the wagon rolled over the last hill and the Bradshaw property came into view, Raina's breath caught like a stitch pulled too tight. The ranch yard looked nothing like a working ranch. Instead, it looked like a scene straight out of an Eastern magazine. Ribbons in burgundy and cream hung from railings. Long tables overflowed with roasted venison, stacked cornbread, fresh pies, and whiskey bottles worth more than she earned in a month. Fiddlers tuned their instruments. Wealthy-looking women in silk bustles and polished gloves whispered behind fans. Men smoked cigars that cost $1 each. Raina's patched cotton dress felt like burlap compared to their fine clothes. Her crooked church-donated hat barely sat on her pinned hair. She stepped down quickly, trying to blend into the busy yard. Where was the sewing job she'd been promised? Nothing made sense. A pair of women eyed her like she didn't belong. One whispered loudly, "Who invited the help?" Their words stung like fresh needles. Before Raina could retreat, her eyes caught movement near the large porch of the ranch house. Braden Bradshaw. Everyone knew his name. The Bradshaw Ranch covered 40,000 acres of prime grazing land. He was rich, powerful, and respected across 3 territories. At 31, he had built an empire with his own hands. Men feared disappointing him. Women dreamed of catching his attention. But today, he looked like a man being marched to his own hanging. His mother hovered near him, dressed in black silk, urging him toward a polished blonde woman in rose-colored taffeta. Alia Randolph, a perfect society match. Rich, elegant, educated, loved by every wealthy family across the frontier. Raina watched Braden, noticing the tight set of his jaw, the way his eyes kept searching the yard like he wanted to run. He looked trapped. She understood that feeling too well. She took one step toward the house, hoping to find whoever needed sewing work, when a red-faced drunk man stumbled into her path. "You there," he barked. "Fetch me whiskey, the expensive kind." Raina stiffened. "Sir, I'm not." "Don't argue. Move those sewing scraps out of the way. You're blocking traffic." Laughter rolled around them. Women hid smiles behind fans. Men smirked. Heat burned across Raina's cheeks. She stumbled back, her boot catching on uneven dirt. Her bag nearly slipped from her hands. But before she hit the ground, strong hands caught her shoulders. Her breath froze. Braden Bradshaw stood behind her. He steadied her with a grip that felt firm, sure, gentle. Up close, he smelled like leather and sage. His storm blue eyes met hers, and something sparked, quick and quiet, like recognition. Then his gaze sharpened with sudden decision. He leaned down, his breath brushing her ear. "Darling, I need you to pretend something for me right now." "Can you do that?" Raina blinked, confused. "What?" "Pretend to be my wife." The words hit her harder than the fall would have. "Wife?" Before she could speak, Braden slid his hand from her shoulder down her arm, warm and steady, until his fingers laced with hers like it was something he'd done 1,000 times. Then he lifted their joined hands high for the entire crowd to see. Every whisper stopped. Every fiddle string went silent. Braden's voice carried clear and sharp across the yard. "This here is my wife. I ain't courting anyone else. Party's over." Gasps spread like wildfire. Alia Randolph's face drained pale, then flushed red. Ellie Bradshaw nearly choked. The drunk man stumbled away in shame. And Raina. She stood frozen as Braden pulled her gently into his side, his hand settling at her waist with a firm claim that made her heart jump. To everyone watching, they looked exactly like what he said. Husband and wife. He leaned down again, his warm breath brushing her cheek. "Just follow my lead, please." She should say no. She should step away. She should tell the truth. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the heat of his hand on her waist and the way he shielded her from a yard full of judging eyes. Before she understood what was happening, Ellie Bradshaw stormed toward them. "Braden Samuel Bradshaw," she hissed, "you are not married." Braden didn't flinch. "We wed 3 weeks ago in Laramie. Small ceremony. Just us and a preacher." Raina's heart thudded wildly. A marriage? 3 weeks ago? A preacher? It was a perfect lie. A dangerous one. Ellie glared at Raina. "Your mother does laundry at the boarding house." Raina swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." "And you're telling me you're married to my son?" Raina opened her mouth to confess, but Braden's grip tightened at her waist. His voice cut through the air like a blade. "She is my wife, and I expect everyone to show her proper respect." It was the beginning of a firestorm Raina never could have imagined. Music resumed awkwardly. Guests pretended to talk. Women whispered behind fans, eyes sharp. Men watched Braden with new curiosity. Braden didn't release her. Instead, he guided her onto the dance floor. "Just follow along," he murmured as he led her through careful steps. "We have to make this look real." Real. Her hands trembled in his. His touch was warm and steady. Her heart felt like it might lift out of her chest. "Braden," she whispered, "this is insane." "Maybe," he said, his eyes locked on hers, "but it saved us both." When the song ended, he didn't let go right away. They stood close, breathless, suspended in a moment that felt too intimate, too dangerous, too real. And Raina realized something terrifying. One lie had just changed her entire life. 3 hours after the ridiculous lie that changed everything, the last of the shocked guests finally rolled away in wagons and carriages. Sunset washed the Bradshaw ranch in gold, but Raina Morrow felt anything but warm. She stood near the wagon that would take her back to Laramie, her heart pounding as Braden Bradshaw approached with a look she couldn't read. Everything inside her still spun from the unbelievable events of the afternoon. One moment she was being mocked by strangers. The next, she was dancing in the arms of the richest cowboy in the territory, while he told everyone she was his wife. Braden stopped in front of her, hat in hand, confidence slipping just a little now that the crowd was gone. "I know today was unexpected," he said. Raina let out a strained laugh. "Unexpected is one word for it." "I'll make this right," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Come to the ranch tomorrow morning. We'll talk properly." "Talk about what?" Raina asked. "How to untell everyone we're married?" He hesitated. "Or maybe figure out a different solution." A different solution. The words made her stomach tighten in confusion and fear. Before she could ask what he meant, he stepped back, tipped his hat, and watched her climb into the wagon. When the horses moved forward, she turned. Braden stood in the fading light with his hands in his pockets, watching her until she disappeared. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay on her narrow boarding house bed, listening to the creaks and cries of the old building. Her mother slept in the next room, still coughing from the pneumonia that had left her weak, and deeply in debt. Debt Raina had no way to pay. But maybe Braden had a reason for what he did. Morning came, pale and cold. With trembling hands, Raina put on her best blouse and skirt, pinned her hair, and walked 10 long miles to the Bradshaw Ranch, accepting a ride from a kind farmer's wife for the last stretch. Rumors of yesterday's marriage had spread fast. Mrs. Burton, who gave her the ride, gossiped the whole way. Richest cowboy in Wyoming, married in secret. And to a seamstress, such romance. Romance! The word lodged in Raina's throat like a thorn. When she reached the ranch, Braden was waiting at the door, dressed simple and clean, his sleeves rolled up. He looked more like a man than an empire today. "Miss Morrow," he said, "come on in." Quote. He led her to a study lined with ledgers and books. She sat stiffly in a leather chair while he leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "I apologize for yesterday," he began. "I shouldn't have dragged you into that without asking." "Then why did you?" she asked softly. He was silent for a long moment. Finally, he exhaled. My mother has been pushing marriage at me ever since my divorce. She wants me to marry Alia Randolph. It would merge our ranch with their grain empire. She's been planning it for months. I wasn't interested." Raina nodded slowly. She had heard the gossip about his failed first marriage, about the banker's daughter who hated ranch life and humiliated him when she left. "I panicked," Braden admitted. "Saw you being embarrassed. Needed an escape. Seemed like we could help each other." "Help each other how?" Raina whispered. Without answering, Braden handed her a folded document. She opened it and felt her breath stop. It was a contract. Neat handwriting spelled out every detail. If Raina agreed to pretend to be his wife for 1 full year, Braden would pay her mother's $75 debt, set her up with a fully stocked seamstress shop in Laramie, give her her own rooms at the ranch, pay her $25 a month. Her hands shook as she reached the last line, underlined boldly. Neither party shall develop romantic feelings for the other. If either party does, the agreement ends immediately. The rule hit her like a slap. "Why add that?" she asked. Braden's eyes darkened. "Because feelings complicate business. I've lived through that once. Never again." He looked away, jaw working. "This protects us both," he said quietly. Raina looked at the contract again, at the promise of freedom for her mother. A shop of her own. A life she never thought she'd have. Everything she needed was in that paper. She looked up at him. His eyes were steady, waiting. "Where do I sign?" she said. Braden didn't smile, but something in him softened. He handed her a pen. They signed. Just like that, on ink and fear and hope, Raina Morrow became, in the eyes of the world, Mrs. Braden Bradshaw. Things happened quickly after that. The next morning she moved into the ranch. Braden gave her a room in the east wing with a view of the sunrise. He paid her mother's debt and moved her into a warm cottage near the garden. He made sure they had everything they needed. It was all pretend. But his kindness didn't feel pretend. Dinner that first night was awkward at first. The ranch hands didn't know what to make of the quiet seamstress suddenly living in the house. But Braden treated her with calm respect, speaking to her gently, including her in conversations. Slowly, the tension eased. After dinner, he walked her to the staircase. "You need anything, you ask," he said. "This is your home now." Home. The word pressed against her heart with strange warmth, but it wasn't really home. It was temporary. A lie wrapped in a contract. Still, when she climbed the stairs and felt Braden's gaze linger behind her, she felt something shift deep inside, something she wasn't supposed to feel. Days passed in a gentle routine. Raina sewed in her sunlit room, helped in the kitchen, and ate meals with Braden and the ranch hands. The distance between her and Braden stayed polite, careful, controlled. Then came Thursday. He took her to town to show her the seamstress shop he had prepared. It was better than anything she had dreamed. Bolts of bright fabric lined the walls. A new sewing machine gleamed on the table. Sunlight poured through the large front window. "It's yours," he said quietly. "A promise is a promise." Her breath caught. "Braden, this is too much." "It's fair," he said. "You're risking a lot for me." She didn't know what to say. Gratitude tightened her throat. The shop opened that Saturday. The town poured in. She took orders all day until her back ached. When Braden came to pick her up, she was half asleep on her feet. He helped her into the carriage. His arm slipped around her waist to steady her. She leaned into him without thinking. "You did good today," he murmured. She didn't have strength to answer. He helped her upstairs, set her gently on her bed, and took off her boots before covering her with a quilt. His touch was careful. His voice soft. "Good night, Raina." She fell asleep to the sound of his footsteps leaving. Then came the storm. The night lightning split the sky into jagged pieces. Raina sat in the parlor sewing when the front door crashed open. Braden stumbled in, soaked to the skin, rain dripping off him like he had wrestled the storm itself. His shirt clung to every line of his chest. His hair was wet. His eyes burned with cold and exhaustion. Raina froze, staring. He looked wild and handsome and altogether too real. Storm came fast, he muttered. Cattle are safe. He moved toward the fire, water dripping everywhere. You'll catch pneumonia, Raina said, rising without thinking. Go change. I'll make coffee. He looked at her, really looked at her. The firelight danced across his face, softening hard lines. You're bossy when you're worried, he said. You're stubborn when you're cold. Their eyes held. The air grew warm, too warm. Braden's gaze dropped to her mouth. Thunder cracked directly above the house. Raina jumped. He caught her arm, steadying her. His hand stayed. His thumb brushed her sleeve. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. The moment stretched tight. Then Braden exhaled sharply and stepped back. I should change. Yes. They both stood frozen for another beat before he turned and walked away, leaving Raina alone with the fire and the pounding of her own heart. Something dangerous had begun. Something the contract said must never happen. Something neither of them could stop anymore. The days after the storm grew heavier than rain clouds. Braden and Raina moved around each other with careful distance, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Every glance felt too long. Every touch felt too warm. Every moment alone felt like standing near a fire that could burn them both. They tried pretending. Pretending didn't last. The Laramie Cattlemen's Association gathering came on a crisp Saturday night. It was their first big public appearance since the marriage, and everyone watched them the moment they walked in. Raina wore a green dress she had sewn herself. Braden wore a black suit that made him look carved from confidence and danger. Remember, he whispered as they entered, we're hopelessly in love. Raina nodded. Hopelessly? But the way Braden's hands slid around her waist didn't feel like pretending at all. Across the hall, couples danced and gossip flew thick as dust. Braden guided her from group to group, his hands steady at her back. She could feel his warmth through her dress. She could feel him everywhere. He made her laugh. Quiet jokes, soft teasing, secret looks that made her heart flutter. When the musicians began playing, he offered his hand. Mrs. Bradshaw, he said softly, may I? She placed her hand in his. They moved together like they had always been meant to, slow turns, soft steps, his hand at her waist. Her arm resting on his shoulder, the space between them shrinking, disappearing. Everyone thinks we're real, she whispered. He didn't look away. So do I, he said. Her breath caught. They danced through 7 songs. Long after other couples left the floor, they stayed, moving together like they didn't remember how to let go. On the quiet carriage ride home, the night around them still and cold, something shifted. Braden helped her down when they reached the ranch. His hand circled her waist. He held her there a second too long, her feet barely touching the ground. Raina, he whispered, her name thick in his voice. Yes? But whatever he was about to say, he swallowed it. He stepped back fast, almost like he was afraid. She watched him walk away into the dark. 3 days later, everything shattered. Alia Randolph walked into Raina's shop with a sharp smile and colder eyes. She accused Raina of lying, of tricking Braden, of trapping him. Her words stabbed everywhere Raina was soft. When the door finally slammed behind the angry heiress, Raina sank into her chair, shaking. That night, she told Braden everything. Firelight flickered across his face as he stood in the study, pacing like a restless storm. She thinks our marriage is fake, Raina said quietly. His jaw tightened. Let her talk. She says she'll find out the truth. Braden stopped pacing. I said you are my wife. That's enough. For a year, Raina whispered. Silence hit like a hammer. The contract hung between them like a wall, and Raina saw something in his eyes. Fear, pain, old wounds. Halia said your first marriage destroyed something in you, she murmured. Braden stiffened. I don't want to talk about that. She said you swore off falling in love. His voice went flat. Love has no place in business. But we aren't business anymore, Raina whispered. Braden didn't answer. He walked out of the study. But something had begun to splinter. 2 nights later, it broke. Rain fell steady outside. Raina sat by the fire, mending a shirt when Braden appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No." He sat across from her, closer than he needed to. The firelight softened his face, made him look younger, wearier, human. They talked. About her shop, about the ranch, about life. Then, "Why did you agree to pretend with me?" he asked suddenly. Raina set the shirt down. "Because you looked trapped. And I know what that feels like." He stared at her with something raw in his eyes. "You think you don't belong here?" "I know I don't," she said softly. "This house, this life, it's borrowed." "You're not just anything," Braden said, voice low and fierce. "You're strong, smart, better than any woman I've ever met." Her heart stuttered. He realized what he said, stood quickly to retreat. Again, but this time, Raina stood too. "Why do you pull away every time we get close?" she demanded. "This isn't supposed to be real," he said sharply. "Maybe it already is." He froze. "Let go then," she whispered. "If it isn't real, let go of me." He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Thunder cracked outside. Raina jumped. Braden reached her in 3 long strides, his hands catching her shoulders. "Just thunder," he said. "I know." Quote, but they didn't step apart. His eyes dropped to her mouth, her breath hitched, and slowly, carefully, he leaned down. "Raina," he whispered, "tell me no." She didn't. She lifted her face an inch. That was enough. Braden kissed her. The kiss broke every rule, every promise, every wall. He kissed her like a man starving. She kissed him back like she had waited her whole life. When they broke apart, foreheads touching, breath shaking, he whispered, "We can't." "We just did," she answered. And that was the beginning of the end. Because Raina told him the truth. "I'm falling in love with you." Everything inside Braden shut down, his arms loosened, his eyes turned cold, wounded, terrified. "No," he said, "you can't. You don't get to tell me what I feel. You broke the contract." "So did you," she cried. "You kissed me." "It doesn't matter," he said harshly. "This ends now. Pack your things. You're leaving tomorrow." The words cut her open. "You're a coward," she whispered, tears burning. "You'd rather break us than risk your heart." Braden flinched, but he didn't take the words back. He walked out, and the next morning he sent her away. Raina didn't fight. She packed her trunk. She held her mother's hand. She rode to town with Hamie in silence. When she unlocked her shop, she stood in the middle of it and cried until she couldn't breathe. 3 days passed, and the Bradshaw ranch felt empty for the first time in years. On the 3rd day, Ellie Bradshaw cornered her son. "You drove away the best thing that ever happened to you," she snapped. "Because you're scared. But you know what's worse than heartbreak? Living behind walls so thick no one can love you." Braden stared at the floor, quiet, broken. Then he saddled his horse. At dawn the next morning, he rode into Laramie with one truth pounding in his chest. He loved her. Raina was fitting a dress when the shop bell rang. She looked up, and the world tilted. Braden stood there, hat in hand, eyes full of something she had never seen before. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Mrs. Middleton excused herself with a knowing smile. Raina followed Braden outside, her heart racing. They stood in the cold morning air, breath mixing in the space between them. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything. I pushed you away because I was afraid. I thought losing you later would hurt less than loving you now. I was wrong." Her throat tightened. "Braden?" "Let me finish," he said, voice shaking. "I love you, Raina. Real, honest, terrifying love. No pretending, no contract. Just me, if you'll take me." Tears filled her eyes. "You hurt me," she whispered. "I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. But please, don't walk away from me." He reached for her cheek, trembling. "I love you." A tear fell down her face. "I love you too," she whispered. Relief broke across his features. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him standing. and she held him just as tightly. Everything after that felt like sunrise. They started over. Slowly, properly. He courted her, brought her flowers, walked her home. Told her things he'd never told anyone. 3 weeks later, he took her to the hill overlooking the ranch and went down on one knee. She didn't let him finish the question. She said yes. Their wedding 3 days before Christmas filled the church. Ranch hands, townsfolk, her mother, his mother. Everyone cheering as Braden kissed her like he'd waited a lifetime. Life wasn't perfect. The ranch had hard years. The shop had busy seasons. They lost cattle, rebuilt barns, had long nights with sick babies. But they had each other. And 10 years later, standing in the same ranch yard where he once announced a lie, Braden handed her the old contract, the one with the rule against feelings. She read the new one he had written for them. A contract promising love, forgiveness, laughter, second chances, and no ending. She signed it with tears in her eyes. He signed beside her. "Best rule I ever broke," he whispered before kissing her. Raina smiled against his mouth. "Me too." Because in the end, the one condition Braden swore he'd never break was the only one that saved them both.